Graham, you've just been appointed as Director of Free Church Training at Oak Hill Theological College. Can you tell us what this new role is going to involve?
Yeah, I've been teaching at Oak Hill, doing work with the Free Church students over the past few years, and it's an expansion of that, both wanting to provide courses that are particularly appropriate for Free Church students, areas like independent church history, church polity, so focusing on people training for Free Church ministry, understanding their own background, tradition, thinking things through from a robust theological angle, but also just having a wider overview of what's suitable for those training for Free Church ministry, placements, other ways in which the college can be a helpful place in providing suitable training for those going into independent churches.
And why do you think it's important for men going into independent church ministry to get a full and proper training?
Well, I spent 3 years in full-time local church ministry before I got any training, and if I wasn't sure beforehand, there's nothing like the experience of church ministry to make you realise you need training for church ministry. I think both handling the Bible and some of the skills and tools to do that well for a regular teaching ministry, systematic theology and ethics and other areas to be able to have a framework for discussing issues and approaching pastoral questions, an awareness of issues in history that bring a perspective to life today. Really be able to think, just some of the training in joining the dots, and be able to think clearly and well about some of the challenges we face, what theological principles come into play, so that we're not just responding pragmatically, and we're not responding traditionally. We're not just doing what we've always done, and we're not doing what we just think seems to work. We're working from a clear biblical basis all the time.
And there seems to be a renewed commitment to training on the part of men going into FIEC ministry. Why do you think that's happened, and are you encouraged by it?
I'm certainly encouraged by it. I think that's great. Independent churches have had a mixed relationship with training over the years, being suspicious in part, sometimes somewhat anti-intellectual, and wary of the academic world that training sometimes is involved. And some of that concern's been right and good. Some of the caution, I think, has been misjudged, not realising that theology is something we can grow in, and we can use gifted people to help us grow in that. So some of the anti-intellectual sort of focus, I think, has been misplaced. I think the newer generation don't have that so much. Less sure where that's come from. Possibly seeing the fruits of training in other people's lives and people speaking of the benefits. I know one pastor who spoke of seeing people coming out of places like Oak Hill and other colleges saying, well, they just seem to be better at joining the dots and thinking theologically. This is something that can be imparted and passed on. And as a result, I think we've got more and more younger ministers keen for that sort of training.
And Graham, how can we make sure that training doesn't become disconnected from local church life, so that men who are training are still able to work within a local church environment?
That's a really good question, and something I'm very concerned about. I think there's a number of ways that happen. I think people having some sort of practical experience of church life before they go to college. I mentioned I spent 3 years with a church before I went to train full-time. I think that meant I asked slightly different questions to some people who hadn't had that sort of experience. So I think that can be a great factor. Involvement in local church ministry during time at college. I remember going from discussing with some of my student colleagues how God related to time during the afternoon, a rather esoteric sort of discussion, to going to a small group that evening and trying to open up the Bible with some regular folk who asked all sorts of different questions. They weren't bothered about how God related to time. But I was really glad I was in both conversations. Both were important in their own way, but the second of those helped keep me grounded. I think also lecturers who have real experience of church life whose own career history, as it were, is not purely academic, will mean they're asking the right questions and knowing what the end game is all the time.